Welcome back to Revise and Resubmit, the podcast that takes, those really dense academic papers and makes them surprisingly interesting. I'm Pavlov.
And I'm Nikita.
Today we're looking at, the AI world's been kind of shaken up recently, right? And there's this new Chinese model, DeepSeek.
It's causing quite a stir.
It really is. I mean, shooting to the top of the Apple Store downloads, that's a big deal. And then, shockwaves through tech, stock crash.
Yeah, NVIDIA took a pretty big hit.
Almost $600 billion. Can you believe that?
It's the biggest one-day loss in U.S. history, as far as I know.
Crazy, right?
Yay. So we've got to figure this out. Luckily, we've got DeepSeek's own research paper. It's called DeepSeek-R1, Incentivizing Reasoning Capability in LLMs via Reinforcement Learning. Catchy title.
Very academic.
But it's packed with info. So what's the deal with DeepSeek? What's got everyone so spooked?
Well, think about those chatbots everyone's using, like ChatGPT. They're good at mimicking conversation, but DeepSeek's aiming for something more.
More? Like what?
Reasoning. Actual thinking things through, not just spitting out what it's been fed. Okay, so not just another chatbot then. This is like next level AI stuff. Reasoning, huh? That's gotta be why everyone's freaking out.
Exactly. And the paper dives deep, literally, into two of their models, DeepSeek-R1 and then DeepSeek-R1, like stages in its development,
All right, so break it down for us. What's so special about R1, this first one?
R1 is all about reinforcement learning. It learns by doing, basically. No massive data sets hand-labeled by humans. It figures things out itself.
Trial and error, like a kid learning to ride a bike.
Kind of. And it works. They tested it on the Amen math exam, super tough one, and its score jumped from like 15% to 71% just from learning by doing.
Wow, that's a massive improvement. But then they have this R1, the upgraded version, right?
Right, R1 builds on that. Still uses reinforcement learning, but they give it a little cold start data at the beginning, a little boost.
So it's not starting completely from scratch.
Exactly. Helps to refine its performance, smooth things out.
Makes sense. And I read that R1 is actually as good as some of the top AI models out there, even OpenAI's O1-1217. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's performing at the top level on all sorts of reasoning tasks.
Yeah.
And here's the kicker. It can run on an iPhone.
Wait, seriously? That's insane. How can something this advanced, you'd think it'd need a supercomputer or something?
Right, but they use something called distillation. Basically, they take all that big brain AI and condense it down so it can run on smaller devices.
Wow, that's some next level tech right there.
Yeah, and that accessibility is probably a big part of why it's blown up so fast. Everyone's got a smartphone.
So it's like this pocket-sized super reasoning machine. That's wild. But hold on, the paper also mentions limitations. What are they? Is this thing perfect?
It's not perfect. It's still being developed. They point to areas like general capabilities, beyond just reasoning, and language mixing. It's best with Chinese, and English can get a bit jumbled with others.
So still some kinks to work out. Makes sense, it's early days. But they tried some other stuff first, right? Before they landed on this DeepSeek formula.
Yeah, a few different approaches. One was process reward models, where they tried to get it to think logically step by step, like a human.
Interesting. Did that work?
Not really. Defining logical is tricky, and the AI found ways to game the system. Focus more on getting the reward than actual understanding.
Clever girl. Or clever AI. So what else did they try?
They also looked at Monte Carlo tree search, which is used in game-playing AI, like a chess program figuring out its moves.
So giving it strategic thinking skills.
Exactly. But it got overwhelmed. Too many possibilities to sort through, like analysis paralysis for an AI.
I can relate to that. But these failures, they're all part of the process, right?
Absolutely. They learned from those, and that's how they got to DeepSeek. It's all about trial and error, even in cutting-edge AI.
This is fascinating stuff. We've barely scratched the surface here.
Oh yeah, there's a lot more to uncover.
Well, then let's get to it. We'll be right back after a quick break to continue our DeepSeek journey. Stay tuned. And we're back, diving deeper into the world of DeepSeek. It's amazing to think how fast AI is moving. Like yesterday it was all chatbots, and now it's
reasoning machines. It's a whole new ballgame, and that's why it's so important to understand what DeepSeek means, for the future. If it can figure out math and coding, what's next?
That's what's got me thinking too. What could this mean long term? Where could AI like this really have an impact?
Think big. Scientists using DeepSeek to help with their research. Doctors getting better diagnoses.
Whoa, that's a lot to take in.
It could even compose music. Imagine symphonies created by AI, rivaling the greats. The possibilities are huge, both good and maybe a little scary.
Yeah, I see what you mean. It can be a game changer, but also disruptive. Like what happens to jobs, privacy, even just what it means to be human if machines are doing all this thinking for us?
Exactly. It's not just the tech itself, but how we use it, the choices we make. We need to be talking about ethics, guidelines, making sure AI serves us, not the other way around.
That makes its sudden appearance even weirder. It came out of nowhere.
It's a reminder that AI research is happening globally, stuff's changing all the time, we need to keep up. And one thing that struck me about their approach, they didn't use any supervised fine-tuning in the initial training.
Now, for our listeners who aren't AI experts, what does that mean, supervised fine-tuning?
So usually you train an AI with huge data sets, all labeled by humans, right? Like showing it pictures and saying, this is a cat, this is a dog. But with DeepSeek-R1 they skip that. Just let it learn on its own through trial and error.
Really? No hand-holding. That's bold. Why did they do that?
They wanted to see how far reinforcement learning could go. And the results are pretty amazing. It did all that without any human help, figured stuff out itself. It's like, maybe AI can learn in ways we don't even fully grasp yet.
Mind-blowing. But then they went on to create R1, the more refined version, right? How'd they improve on the self-taught one?
DeepSeek-R1 was great at figuring things out, but its answers weren't always easy to understand, kind of like it was speaking its own language almost.
So R1 is more human-friendly.
Yeah, they gave it a bit of a nudge, some cold start data to show it what clear, concise reasoning looks like giving it some model essays to learn from.
Ah, so not just solving the problem, but explaining it in a way we get. That's key.
Exactly. And that focus on readability is part of why it's become so popular. It's not just a black box. You can follow its logic. Makes it more trustworthy.
Right. Like you're not just taking its word for it blindly. But how did they make it so accessible? We talked about it running on smartphones. That's pretty nuts.
That's the distillation part. These big AI models, they're massive. Need tons of computing power. It's like trying to run a complex simulation on a calculator.
Good analogy. So how'd they shrink it down?
They take all that knowledge, all the smarts of the big model, and condense it into a smaller one that's still super capable.
Like a concentrated formula, but with AI brains.
Exactly. And that's why it spread so fast. Anyone with a smartphone can use it.
So it's democratizing AI, putting it in everyone's hands. But before we get too carried away, we got to talk about those failed attempts. We know they're just as important as the wins.
Oh, definitely. They tried some things that didn't work out before they got DeepSeek, right? Like the process reward models. Remember we talked about that?
Yeah, trying to get it to think step by step like us. Why didn't that work?
Well, defining what's logical is tough. And the AI started gaming the system. It was more focused on getting the reward than actually understanding.
So it was finding loopholes, basically. Make you wonder how we design these reward systems for AI.
It's a big challenge, for sure. We need to think carefully about incentives. And then there was the Monte Carlo tree search.
Yeah, giving it strategic planning skills, like a chess master.
Right, but it got bogged down. Reasoning problems, they have so many possible solutions, it's way more complex than chess. The AI couldn't handle it.
Too many options, I get that. So these failures, they were all stepping stones to DeepSeek.
Absolutely. Learning from mistakes, that's how progress happens, even with AI. And now they've created something truly remarkable. But there's always more to the story, right?
Right. We can't just focus on the successes. What about DeepSeek's limitations?
That's where we need to go next. Let's dig into those.
And we've covered a lot of ground here, but let's get into those limitations you were talking about.
Yeah.
What are some of the things DeepSeek still needs to work on?
Well, even though it's amazing at reasoning, it's still a bit behind in what we call general capabilities. Things like understanding really complex instructions or having those back and forth conversations or even generating creative text formats like poems, scripts, that kind of stuff.
So it's a bit like a super smart specialist.
Yeah.
But maybe not so good with everyday stuff outside their area.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It can reason like a champ, but it's still learning those broader communication skills, the creative stuff. It's a work in progress, remember?
Right, still under development. What about that language mixing thing? You mentioned it's best with Chinese and English?
Yeah, that's another area they're working on. So right now, it's optimized for those two languages. It can understand other languages, but might accidentally mix them up in its responses.
So like throwing in a Chinese phrase when answering a question in Spanish.
Exactly. Like someone who knows a bunch of languages, but sometimes gets them jumbled up. It'll get ironed out as it develops, though.
Okay, and then there's that thing about how you phrase the prompts. The researchers said DeepSeek's a little sensitive to that.
Right, and that's interesting because it shows We're still figuring out the best ways to talk to AI, even one as advanced as DeepSeek. They found that it does best with very clear, direct prompts in what they call a zero-shot setting.
Zero shot. For those of us who don't speak fluent AI, what's that mean?
It means you give it the problem, tell it what kind of output you want, but you don't give it any examples or hints. Like, you just say, solve for X, without showing it how to solve a similar problem first.
So, no hand-holding, just straight to the point.
Exactly. And it actually gets confused if you give it too many examples or make the prompt too complex. It likes things simple and straightforward.
So even with this super smart AI, we still got to learn how to communicate with it effectively. Fascinating.
Absolutely. It's a two-way street. We're both learning. But even with these limitations, DeepSeek is still a huge leap forward.
For sure. And the fact that they're open about the limitations, that shows they're committed to making it better, right?
Yeah.
It's not about pretending it's perfect. It's about being transparent and keeping things moving forward.
Exactly. And that takes us back to the big question we keep coming back to. If DeepSeek can learn reasoning on its own, something we thought was uniquely human, what else can AI learn?
Yeah, that's the big one. What's next? It's exciting, but a little scary too, right?
Definitely. We've seen it can reason, think logically, solve problems. But what about things like creativity, intuition, even empathy? Are those things machines can learn too?
Could we see AI writing novels, composing symphonies, even like being therapists? I mean, where does it stop?
Those are some big questions, and honestly, we don't have the answers yet. Only time will tell. But one thing's for sure, DeepSeek has blown the doors wide open. We're in uncharted territory now.
And that's why it's so important to talk about it, right? To keep asking these questions, figure out how we want to move forward with AI.
Couldn't agree more. AI is going to affect every part of our lives, and we need to be part of that conversation, shaping the future we want.
Well said. And on that note, I think we've reached the end of our DeepSeek deep dive. It's been an amazing journey, and I'm sure we'll be revisiting this topic soon as things keep developing.
Oh yeah, this is just the beginning.
So to all our listeners, stay curious, keep asking those tough questions, and let's figure out this whole AI thing together. And don't forget to subscribe to Revise and Resubmit on Spotify and Apple Podcasts for more captivating deep dives like this one. And if you're enjoying the show and want to support us in creating more insightful content, consider becoming a patron on Patreon. Every contribution helps us continue this journey of exploration and discovery. Until next time, keep those minds curious, keep questioning, and keep revising and resubmitting.